Good morning, Kahal Kadosh, Beruchim Habaim to everybody. Today, the 16th day of Kislev, 5781, the second day of December 2020. We have a special dedication today for the class to wish a happy birthday to Yosef ben Esther, which I personally know for many years, graciously dedicated by his wife, and by Ezat Hashem, the zechut of the learning of today. Not only Hashem grants Yosef ben Esther and his wife and family a good life, a healthy life, a happy life, and may Hashem bless him with great success in all areas of life, physical, spiritual, health, parnasah, nahat from the children, and many more blessings to come. What a magnificent and beautiful and thoughtful a birthday gift for a husband. Unbelievable. It covers all areas. I'm very impressed by this. I do know this great couple for many years. I actually married them a while back in the holy city of Jerusalem, but we're not going to give any further details about who they are, but I'm sure that they know that I'm talking about them. Additionally, today's class, graciously sponsored by Moshe ben Susan, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved father, Yaakov ben Esther, as well as by Mr. Hai Cohen Arazi, Le'ilui Nishmat, Zahava Wendy Bat Miriam, Iratzon, that the Neshamot have Aliyah in Gan Eden. Amen. So today's Gemara, it actually comes from the tractate known as Baba Kama. Baba Kama, it deals with the topic of liabilities that a person needs to pay whenever they cause some type of damage to another human being, another person. In some cases, liabilities are also applied when it comes to animals or property of somebody else's, but we'll concentrate in a very, very interesting message of the Gemara. The Gemara of today discusses a very interesting concept. Let me give you basically one line of the Mishnah in the beginning of this chapter. So this way we are able to understand a bit better the Gemara of today. So I'm going to read quickly first Mishnah chapter 8, and it says as follows: HaChobel b'havero. This is a case of personal injury, basically. So the Mishnah writes, one who inflicts a wound on another person, Hayav alav mishum hamisha devarim. He can be liable of 5 different types of compensation. Number 1, the Mishnah says, nezek, the actual damage caused to the victim. Sar, the pain and suffering, so to speak, of the victim. Ripui, all related to medical expenses, whatever that means. Doctor visits, physical therapy, prescriptions, whatever that involves. Shevet, loss of employment. That can be translated in today's concepts as loss of income. And the last one, number 5, uboshet, the humiliation that a person experiences by getting hurt by another person. And all this will be discussed throughout this particular chapter of the Gemara. But I like to concentrate in a couple of lines when the Gemara discusses the liability payment for humiliating someone by hurting someone, and maybe, God forbid, there was some type of a defect or a side effect that is, God forbid, has v'shalom, irreversible, etc. So we understand the concept of boshet. Boshet can also be translated as embarrassment, etc. I'm going to move my coffee here because I do have a lot of stuff on the table, books and wires. So I like to read quickly the Gemara that discusses about the embarrassment of this particular piece of the Talmud. So the Gemara writes, Afilu. And this is the language of the Gemara. The concept of embarrassment. But what about the pain and suffering? So far, all these types of liabilities that we discuss, they are connected to a financial compensation, literally. Now, but what else is required? Comes the Gemara and it says, Sa'aro, when it comes to suffering, afilu heve kol ele nevayot sheba'olam, even if he brought the, let's call it, the nicest or the most beautiful korbanot for the Bet HaMikdash. A person brought Aberdeen Angus animals, yani top of the line, better than USDA Prime and much better than USDA Choice. He brought Aberdeen Angus. The Gemara says, En nimhalo ad sheyivakesh mimenu. It says there is no forgiveness to this person's actions until he requests mehila. When a person asks for forgiveness, or the person comes to the victim and apologizes for the damage and the pain and suffering that this fellow caused him. Very interesting message of the Gemara. Now, with that being said, let's read quickly some of the commentaries on this particular topic, right here. Where do we learn that asking for forgiveness is required when a person causes suffering to another person? The Gemara answers, Sefer Bereshit, the story of Avimelech. Shene'emar, Hashev eshet ha'ish ki navi hu beit palel batcha. Basically, it means Hashem tells Avimelech that Abraham is a Navi, and the lady that he took was actually his wife. So it says, return the man's wife, and he will pray for you. What does it mean? That in the way, this means that the zechut of Avimelech, number one, returning the wife, and Abraham Avinu was a Navi. The Torah says it, ki navihu. So Abraham Avinu knew that Sara was not touched, was not defiled. She remained holy and pure. But yet, God says to Avimelech, return, that means do teshuvah, apologize for the action that you made, beit palel ba'atcha, and he will pray for your well-being. That means to be able to conceive children. Very interesting Gemara. Now, what can we do with this Gemara? So let me see just one small comment. About this particular message of the Gemara. And I'm going to open it up a bit, although it is not the main topic that the Gemara discusses. The Gemara actually discusses what were the additional side effects experienced by Avimelech and the family of Avimelech and the citizens of the palace and the residents of the city, and even the hens did not lay an egg that particular night. That's what the Gemara discusses, the dimension of the action of Avimelech. But I believe that, like it or not, we cannot avoid the need to say the following. The Gemara was very clear, okay? The Gemara says, you cause someone pain and suffering, you want that sin to be forgiven, you must step up to the plate and ask for forgiveness from the victim. I like to say something that perhaps, may be able to be said or not, but I think that this particular Gemara must be transferred as a beautiful message for marriage and interpersonal relationships, which is one of the main, I don't want to say challenging, but mandatory topics of learning and discussion. Because at the end of the day, marriage, as we have been learning in the Shalom Bayit class in Spanish, that we have every night, basically we're discussing, how powerful the concept of marriage is, and how beautiful and how godly the power of marriage is. But if God forbid, there is no mutual respect, and there is, God forbid, criticism and ways of talking that hurt, has v'shalom, that can hinder and affect, without any doubt, the holiness and the blessing that marriage brings upon the person. Because marriage does bring blessing into the person. And then somebody may say, but Rabbi, I'm doing everything good. Why I'm not successful? So the question is, and I'm sorry to bring it up, how do you speak to each other? How do you speak to each other? Here, the Gemara already is telling us, even if you brought the ele nevayot, yani the best possible offering that exists, the most expensive rams that are out there. It's like a person who does chesed outside of the home, but zero chesed inside of the home. It doesn't make sense. In English, we say charity begins at home, so chesed must be at home. And who should be the first recipient of chesed? The spouse, between husband and wife, children. After husband and wife, children, then comes everybody else. Don't confuse the priorities, because at the end of the day, I don't want to say what I would like to say, but I'm going to say it. A person sometimes says, you know what, I do plenty of chesed outside of my home, so therefore I don't have to do it inside of the home. I beg to differ. I'm not sure if doing chesed outside of the home, not only that doesn't justify not doing it inside of the home, but maybe that chesed done outside of the home is not really counted as chesed. Why? Because we left the spouse suffering or children being neglected at home. Because a person wants to be the superhero or this superman or this superwoman, whatever that means. Chesed here, visiting here, Havira Kadisha here, rides to the airport, ran all over. But at the end of the day, the main Bet HaMikdash, the main sanctuary of the person, becomes neglected, which is nothing is coincidental. As I said the other day, we believe in Ashgaha Peratit. And this is one of the things that the Zohar will talk about, the necessity of shalom, of peace between husband and wife. I did not pick the topic. This is the topic given for this menu of today, Perashat Vayishlach. Wednesday, check out the Chok LeIsrael. You'll see in the Gemara the concept of pain and suffering and the necessity of forgiveness. It's like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. What Yom Kippur actually achieves in the world of forgiveness? Short answer. Ben Adam lamakom. My relationship with God, not my relationship with my spouse, not my relationship with my friends, not my relationship with my relatives, only my relationship with God. But you know what the Maimonides, the great Rambam, writes in the Laws of Teshuvah? That if a person wants to have a heavenly level of forgiveness for the spiritual aspect of Yom Kippur, make peace with your fellow men. And that's why the halakha writes clearly that husband and wife must ask for forgiveness from each other, especially on Erev Kippur. And I'm not saying, God forbid, that only once a year you have to ask for forgiveness. But before Yom Kippur is mandatory. But not only that, any time that an argument or a very strong discussion develops in a home, it doesn't get fixed in 3 minutes. Sometimes it lingers for hours, for days, for weeks. Hopefully not. And that's what the Gemara, I believe, is trying to tell us between the lines. It says you could have had a beautiful aliyah on Shabbat. You could have given a great donation to the synagogue. You could have done many acts of chesed. But forget about that, because there is somebody suffering at home. Your spouse. Sometimes the victim could be the wife. Sometimes the victim could be the husband. So when it comes to Ben Adam lahavero, interpersonal relationship, it doesn't matter. But we, from perhaps experience, we understand that there is an issue of Shalom Bait in the world. And this is the reality of today's Gemara. The Gemara, Pashut, Baba Messiah says, ask for forgiveness. It's not a sign of weakness asking for forgiveness, and it's not a sign of weakness recognizing a mistake. We need to leave the pride on the side, and we need to be able to have a communication channels and good dialogue and good love and good respect between husband and wife. Because at the end of the day, if Hashem put together a husband and a wife, it means that Hashem believes in this relationship, and they can supplement each other to become the great potential that God gave them. But many times, Chas v'Shalom, this type of situations hinders the relationship and creates a freezing level of relationship between them, and really keeps away Hashem bountiful blessing on the concept of marriage. The concept of marriage is not over for today. I'm going to put a pause on it, and I'm going to move on to the Zohar of today, and then the Zohar is going to bring the topic of Shalom Bait in a few minutes. So we're going to put a hold on Shalom, and we're going to come now to Yaakov and Esav. The Zohar explains that Yaakov Avinu, as we discussed in the parasha of this week by Ishlach, is getting ready to meet Esav, and then the pasuk says, "Be'o'avar lifnehem ba'ishtahu arsa sheva pe'amim ad gishto ad ahiv." It says, the Zohar Kadosh, that Yaakov Avinu went ahead everyone else of his family, wives and children, and he bowed down to Esav 7 times as a sign of reverence. If you see a king or a queen, you'll see basically people lower the head, or they even bow down to a certain extent, etc. And the Zohar Kadosh begins today's class with a very beautiful question. And the Zohar says, I don't understand. Yaakov Avinu represents holiness, godliness, wholesomeness, the truth, and the essence of Torah. Esav regretfully demonstrates completely the opposite. How is it possible that Yaakov Avinu bows down to someone that represents unholiness or lack of holiness. Comes the Zohar Kadosh and it says, no. It says we need to understand that actually Yaakov Avinu alav shalom, it wasn't bowing down to Esav, but actually was bowing down to the Shekhinah, to the holy presence of Hashem that was waiting to give Yaakov Avinu a welcoming reception. Welcome back home, Yaakov. Now the triangular aspect of the Avot, Abraham, Ishaq, and Yaakov rather, it's complete. Plus now, Yaakov Avinu comes with the Shevatim. 11 of them, plus Dinah, Rachel will give birth to Binyamin a bit later, but this is the picture of this particular encounter. This is what the Zohar Kadosh explains what was actually the actions of Yaakov Avinu. Obviously, Yaakov Avinu wasn't bowing down to the idolatry made for Esav, so to speak, or the tum'ah, or the impurity that Esav was representing, but for Esav purposes, he took it like Yaakov Avinu is bowing down to him, and that preserves the peace and lessens the tension, which it's not the only time that we have seen this type of scenario. You remember the Navi known as Elisha HaNavi, great Navi, student of Eliyahu HaNavi, that Be'ezat Hashem will talk about him hopefully on Friday, connected to this week's Perashah, by the way. Excuse me. And Elisha, performed an indirect miracle to Naaman. Naaman was a Gentile, a Goy general, and Naaman was afflicted by leprosy, and Elisha sends him a message, go deep into the river, then come see me, and Naaman was healed. And Naaman was impressed by Elisha to the point that he wanted to offer some level of compensation to Elisha, and Elisha says, no, it's on the house. A beautiful Kiddush Hashem. Regretfully, the assistant of Elisha, known as Gehazi, he messed it up later on when he went and asked money from Naaman for the healing therapy services that he received by Elisha HaNavi. And that created Hilul Hashem, and that's an unhappy ending to that story. But in between the dialogue of Elisha and Naaman, Elisha, Navi, Sadiq, Yehudi, Naaman now is becoming a Baal Teshuvah. He accepts Hashem, he recognizes that idolatry is empty, and he asks a question to Elisha. Being a great general in the army, his king will go occasionally to places of idolatry and will bow down to them. But Naaman didn't know what to do. He should bow down, but he knows that bowing down to a statue is a sin, and it's an empty aspect of faith. So Elisha says, when you bow down with the king, have in mind that you're bowing down to Hashem. Again, don't take this literally for us. When you're in the level of Elisha, Be'ezat Hashem, you can tell us what to do. But I'm only sharing an interesting fact that is important to know. But the Zohar additionally brings one more example. And it brings an example from David and Naval HaKarmeli. Naval HaKarmeli, colorful fellow. I'm not going to give you the full version of the story, but I'll tell you what happened with him. David HaMelech, as we know, part of his life was running away from danger, from threats, from literally to save his life. And in one of these situations, David and his people had no food. Parallel to that, Naval HaKarmeli, the name already says it a bit, Naval, was making like a Seudat Hoda'ah, was making a Thanksgiving feast to Hashem for a very successful season that he had with his cattle. He's making a Seudat Hoda'ah. David HaMelech, David, sends him a message. And it says to him, very famous verse, ואמרתם כל אחי, ביתה שלום, וביתך שלום, בכל אשר לך שלום. That pasuk is found in the book of Shmuel 1, chapter 25, verse 6. Ko lechai, like you're alive today, may you be alive and well next year, God willing. Ve'ata shalom, peace upon you. Ubetecha shalom, and peace with your wife. V'chol asher lecha shalom, and everything else in you should be peaceful. This pasuk, besides being quoted in the Zohar of today, is a pasuk that many of us recite Mosai Shabbat in the prayer of Ve'iten Lecha. At the end of Ve'iten Lecha, we learned this a few weeks ago. This was actually the blessing that Ishak Avinu gave Yaakov, Ve'iten Lecha Elokim. You read this Mosai Shabbat in Chupot before the wedding or before the reading of the Ketubah. The Hazan sings Ve'iten Lecha Elokim, etc. And at the end of Ve'iten Lecha, which are all besukim of blessings, of well-being, of happiness and success, etc., we recite this verse 7 times or 6 times. And the reason why this verse is repeated is because I want the blessing of health. I want the blessing of being alive. I want the blessing of peace for me, by me, myself, and I. I want to have peace with my wife, and I want to have peace with everything around me. It's not only once a week requirement. It's every day requirement. And therefore, when a person recites this verse on Mosai Shabbat at the end of the Ve'iten Lecha prayer, which is, by the way, an optional prayer, but many of us say it on a regular basis, it's like we're making a peace vitamin distribution for every day of the week. So, before continuing discussing the pasuk of David and Naval and what happens, which I don't think it's relevant for at this second, but in a few minutes we'll come back. So this pasuk, in a very single short sentence, brings me the word shalom 3 times. So I think that if we're going to dissect this pasuk, we understand that to have shalom in our home is not something nice to have. It's not an optional piece of furniture or a new gadget that you buy for the house. If you have it, fine. If you don't have it, it's also fine. It seems to be that it's an imperative presence in the home to have shalom at home. But how do I start that shalom? Ve'ata shalom. The pasuk says, you want to have peace with your wife. You need to start having peace with you. In other words, I hope that you understand what the pasuk is saying. You know, if a person has a situation, try to work it out. Because what you project, it will affect your marriage. And what the marriage projects, it will affect the entire environment of the home. And especially if there are children. And this is the meaning of this particular pasuk. Besides going back to King David, you know, I'm sure, the rest of the story. What happened after this fact that David sends a messenger with a blessing to Naval, Obviously, they said, listen, the boys are starving. Can I take some leftovers from the tray, from the table? Naval refused to give them food. David sent another group and he said, listen, you are celebrating a successful year in the field, but ask your employees how many times we came to their rescue to protect them from robbers or from animals' attacks. We step up to the plate. What was Naval's answer when he heard this? Did I ask you to do it? David HaMelech wasn't happy. It just shows, in a way, the attitude and the personality of this colorful character known as Naval. David HaMelech became very upset. He wanted to go to pay him a visit. But you know that visit could have meant war. So the smart and intelligent and pious wife of Naval, named Abigail, she took the leftovers and she delivered them to David and his people. The next day, she tells Naval in breakfast, by the way, I hope you don't mind, I gave the leftovers from the Saudah to David and his people. If you look in the book of Shmuel 1, chapter 25, you'll see what was the reaction of Naval. You know what was his reaction? He became very upset. He became furious. He became depressed. And he was sick for 10 days. From Erev Rosh Hashanah till Erev Kippur. In Erev Kippur, he left the world. He was not granted the merit of living throughout Yom Kippur, as we discussed this a long time ago. Living throughout the day of Kippur, it brings certain level of atonement to the person. Nabal did not have this merit because he wasn't willing to share. He wasn't willing to accept David's salutation and understanding that if he's making a Saudat Hoda'ah in part, is because of David's intervention to protect his animals and his shepherds, etc. So it says, the Zohar Kadosh, that even though Esav was a wicked person, even though Naval was a wicked person, but nevertheless, Tzaddikim, especially in the level of Yaakov Avinu and David HaMelech, alav shalom, you know, what it seems on the surface is not the reality of life. They are in a whole different level than ours. So David HaMelech invoked the name of Hashem, as we learned in the past that Shalom is one of the names of Hashem. And we see that Yaakov Avinu bowed down to Esav 7 times, but only that bowing down to Esav was only an external mirage of actually what was happening in front of Esav. The holy and single intention of Yaakov Avinu was to bow down to Hashem, to the Shekhinah. And that's how the Zohar Kadosh discusses today. And it says, the great is the merit of the Tzaddikim, that they do things in order to honor HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is Derech HaYashar. This is the proper pathways that Tzaddikim follow. Lo lehatot miderech HaTorah yamin usmol. Not to deviate from the pathways of the Torah to the left or to the right. Okay, today's halacha, interesting enough, talks about honoring rabbis. I didn't write this. This comes from the Rambam, Laws of Talmud Torah, and it says, like a person is mesuveh as a commandment to honor his parents, also the person has a commandment to honor his rabbis, his Torah teachers. And here what it means rabbis, it means every rabbi should be respected, including among rabbis. That's a given. Must exist a certain level of kavod between the rabbinate. Even though that sometimes we may agree or we may not disagree. But if there is no kavod among the rabbinate, so sometimes people say, oh, he's not giving it, I'm not giving it. So let's not get into the political arena, just talk on the basic peshat of the halacha. And it says, why? שאביו מביאו לעולם הזה, ברבו מביאו לחיי העולם הבא. It says, what's the difference between the father and a son and a teacher, a rabbi? That the father brings the child to the physical world. But the rabbi, and again, we're not talking about, in this case, any rabbi. Yes, every rabbi should be treated respectfully. Every person should be treated respectfully. But I think that the Rambam at this moment refers to Rabbo, the teacher that the student learned the most. That case, it takes an equal, if not higher priority than the father in certain scenarios. Okay? And the Rambam brings the importance of Kol HaCholekim Rabbo. It says a person that, how do I say this? That argues with the rabbi. What does that mean, argues with the rabbi? We're not saying that it's a halachic debate, like in the time of the Talmud, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. We're talking about the rabbi made certain ruling, and a person says, I don't agree with that ruling. For example, that is a problem, the Rambam says. Now, if you want to tell the rabbi privately, Rabbi, but I heard that other Hacham says yes or no, depends on the scenario, that's a whole different story. But if a person, God forbid, is going to argue with a rabbi, especially in a public setting, in a public forum, כאילו חולק על השכינה. It's like a person, it's arguing with God. What example the Rambam brings down? A person, let's say, that there is a Torah class by the rabbi, and then suddenly somebody decides to open up a new class without asking permission, without being approved. What is he saying? My class is better than the class of the rabbi. Obviously, if this person will approach the rabbi may have different answers. Thank you for your suggestion, but I'd rather not. You may ask, why not? Maybe because you're not a good teacher. Maybe your Yirat Shamayim is lacking. Maybe your ideas are crooked. Who knows the reason why? Or maybe the rabbi wants to keep it more of in a cohesive way. And that's what the Rambam says. שקובע לא מדרש, ביושב בדורש ומלמד שלא ברשות רבו, ברבו קיים. The rabbi is around, but he wants to open up his own in the shul. Lack of kavod, lack of derech eretz. This is a given halacha that the Rambam brings down in this particular concept. And not only that, ואסור לאדם להורות בפני רבו לעולם. And there is a prohibition, the Rambam says. Let's say that somebody asks a question, and a person says, you know what? Permissible. Hold on, are you the rabbi? No, but the rabbi is talking to somebody else. So what? Who gave you permission to answer? I'm not going to tell you what the Rambam says. I'm going to read it in Hebrew. כל המורה הלכה בפני רבו חייב מיתה. You know what that means? For today, I'm not going to explain it to you. But it means that the heavens is not happy with this kind of attitude. Although we say in the Haggadah of Pesach, כולנו חכמים, כולנו נבונים, etc. But I think that people understand what the Rambam is trying to say. That the Hachamim have a huge responsibility with the people, and sometimes Hachamim need to make certain rulings or certain decisions that perhaps they seem to be strange to the layman, but actually do carry the necessary, a backing that is required in order to make a decision that is beneficial for the people and obviously for the respective kehilot. But Baruch Hashem, we're dealing with a beautiful and a very holy audience, so I have no doubts that Be'ezat Hashem, everybody does what they're supposed to be. in the respect to the rabbi, to the rabbinettes, etc. We'll finish the class by expressing our gratitude to today's generous sponsor for dedicating the shiur in honor of their husband's birthday, Yosef ben Esther, and Be'ezat Hashem, the zechut of Torah learning, and all the beautiful things mentioned in the Gemara, in the Zohar, etc., that Hashem bless him in all areas of life, spiritually, physically, financially, families, etc., as well as Le'ilui Nishmat Yaakov ben Esther and Zahava Wendy Bat Miriam. My dear friends, have a great day. We'll see each other by Be'ezat Hashem tomorrow at approximately 9:15 via iTorah.com. Have a great day, everybody.